The men's college basketball season is in full swing, which means it is time to get serious and talk some ball. Welcome to Countdown to Game Day, covered by State Farm here in Studio E in Bristol, Connecticut, alongside ESPN college basketball insider Jeff Borzello. I am Sam Ravech. We were gone, now we are back, and we are here to talk about college ball because it has been an electric first half of the season so far, Jeff.
Awesome season. I mean, it's the Europeans coming in, the freshmen coming in.
Right.
Great teams, great games. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but this week has been incredible.
Oh.
If you're just getting back into college basketball, this week was a great week to do it.
It's been ridiculous so far. And by the way, for those who are watching in the YouTube channel on ESPN YouTube channel, please hit us in the comments. We will get to some of your comments, questions, and concerns. We got a lot of social media chime-ins here on Saturday morning, but let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it and talk about some of the biggest storylines that we have seen over the course of the first half of the season. We got blue bloods. We've got some new bloods as well in the AP Top 10. There are some undefeated teams that maybe we didn't really expect to be undefeated at this point. Hey, Nebraska, looking at you. One of the only Power 4 teams that has never won an NCAA tournament team. They might do that this year. Arizona, Jeff, may be one of those teams that is still undefeated that we kind of thought would be undefeated at this point of the season, no?
Yeah, they lost Caleb Love after last season, but they rebuild with Koa Pete and Braden Burries, 2 top 10 freshmen. And Tommy Lloyd has found a great mix of transfers, freshmen, and returnees. And right now they're playing better than anyone in the country. They have a tough game next week at BYU. If they get past that, who knows how long they can stay undefeated.
No doubt. Obviously, Purdue, Braden Smith on pace to break the all-time assist record there. Michigan has been a wagon this year. Duke, maybe not familiar as folks come over from college football and tune in. They're not the team that they were last year, but I know we got a lot of college football fans that are going to be tuning into the national championship on ESPN on Monday night, Jeff. And for those underdog sports fans out there that have loved following this Indiana story, who's one team maybe that they can root for heading into college basketball season that fits that mold?
There's probably 2 teams. I think Nebraska, as you mentioned, is one of them, a team that has never won an NCAA tournament game. The other obvious one is, and there's an Indiana connection, Vanderbilt with Mark Byington, who coached at James Madison when Kurt Signetti was there. They lost their first game earlier this week, but they play an up-tempo style. They have a big one against Florida today, but they are one of the teams that if you're getting into college basketball, you want to find an Indiana type of team, Vanderbilt or Nebraska are the teams you're rooting for.
Tyler Tanner, local kid there out of Nashville area. He's been ridiculous. They're going to have a tough one today against Florida. We'll talk about that in just a second. But you get a look at the undefeated teams. Yeah, Miami of Ohio, shout out to them. They get Buffalo at Kent State, UMass, and Northern Illinois. They've been a surprise this year, too.
If they get past that at Kent State game, because you look at Arizona, they play at BYU. Nebraska plays at Michigan at the end of the month. Miami of Ohio, if they can win at Kent State 2 games from now, they're going to go into February. They might be the final unbeaten.
Wow, that was my question. Miami, Ohio, the Redhawks may be the last unbeaten team in college basketball. What a story that would be. We got some Hoop Herald chiming in honor of Miami, Ohio, 18-0. You aren't a true Hoop fan if you don't know this man. Look, that is kind of the history of Miami of Ohio basketball there.
Long Island legend, Molly Zerbiak.
Yeah.
The greatest moments came from him, and I don't know if there's anybody of his level on this year's team, but Travis Steele's done a great job. They weren't even picked to win the league this year. They got a couple of first-place votes, but they're rolling right now, and they haven't played the toughest schedule, but again, they can win at Kent State a couple of games from now. They're going to go into February without a loss. What
a story that would be if Miami of Ohio enters like the NCAA tournament as an undefeated team. Who knows what their seed line would be? We're going to get Joey Brackets here in our show over the course of the next couple of weeks too. So stay tuned for that. All right, the concept of freshman phenoms producing at a high level is not a new concept, Borzello, as you know. Just look at Braden Burries. We're just talking about Arizona. But the sheer number of Braden Burries out there this year is maybe the more exhilarating storyline that we've been following along all season. It's just there are so many impact freshmen this season in college basketball.
I mean, this was a freshman class that NBA GMs had circled for a while. It was a loaded class, and it's been that way for a while. And the top 3 have all lived up to expectations, and you can go even past that. But A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, they came into the season as the 3 best players in the class. They've been the 3 best players in the class. And you can go way past that. You can go Darius Acuff, Braylon Mullen. There's a long list of guys that have been incredible this season. But DeBonsa, Boozer, and Peterson, they're putting up 20 points, in Boozer's case, 20 points and 10 rebounds every single night. DeBonsa is coming off of December, which was historic. He put up numbers that we haven't seen anybody do. Boozer, he came into college as a guy that we knew would be productive, we knew would win. He's doing that at Duke. And then Peterson, he's been kind of the one that we've been waiting to see his full potential because he's had the hamstring issue. He's starting to come along. He's been playing incredibly well lately. When he gets to full strength, I do think he's good enough to kind of carry this Kansas team to a couple wins in the tournament.
And it has been a fascinating story to watch as he goes in and out of games, but still, when he's in there, he looks like maybe the #1 pick in the NBA draft. Go back to Kevin Young and BYU. One of the main reasons why A.J. Debonsa decided to go to BYU was because of the NBA pedigree that his head coach had. And he talked a little bit about what A.J. has brought to this team and also what he can be at the next level.
I mean, they built around him with kind of a big three, and you mentioned the NBA stuff. Rob Wright, the point guard, Richie Saunders on the wing, and Debonsa has kind of fit into that big three perfectly. They share the ball. He hasn't forced too much, and that was one of the concerns is, okay, well, how will he do with two elite players around him? And he's playmaking, and he takes over late in games. There have been some first halves where he's quiet. When they need him to score, he scores.
Yeah. There are, again, those are the top three kind of that we've been following throughout the course of the season, but there are a lot of other young players that have really made an impact on their respective teams. I'll start here on one of the more under-the-radar freshmen this year, Braylon Mullins, who was injured for the first 6 weeks of the season for the UConn Huskies with an ankle deal. Throughout the rest of the season, he's the reason they won that Providence game in overtime. He's the reason that they've been in some of these tight games against Seton Hall as of late. I think he might be the best shooter that UConn has had since Ray Allen. Is that a crazy statement to make?
Yeah, he was the best shooter in this freshman class, and he's showing it now that he's. I mean, like you said, he missed 6 weeks.
Yeah.
He came right into that starting lineup. He didn't need much of a runway to get used to college basketball. He went right into the starting lineup, and like you said, he's been integral in some of their late wins.
And you know, a lot of people make the comparison to Jordan Hawkins. I think Braylon Mullins a little bit adds a different dimension on the defensive side of the ball as well. Who's another under-the-radar freshman that you've had an eye on this year?
Well, Caleb Wilson, he came out of high school as a top 5, top 10 recruit, but he wasn't considered in that same tier as Boozer and Debonsa and Peterson. To me, he's been the guy that has come closest to cracking that tier, both from a production and college standpoint. I mean, he's putting up 20 and 10 seemingly every night. He ranks in the top 5 among freshmen in both categories, but also from an NBA draft perspective. He is, I don't think anybody's breaking into that Debonsa Peterson top 2, but I do think that gap between, maybe Boozer at 3 and Wilson at 4 is smaller than people think. And, his physical tools have always been there. He's showing a lot more as a playmaker, a lot more as a defensive player, a much stronger motor than we saw at the high school level. He's been incredible. The freshman, one big storyline this year. Obviously, the new transfer portal rules has been another breaking news storyline that just dropped on Wednesday. It was announced the college basketball transfer portal will open for a 15-day period the day after the national championship game comes to a close. Obviously, it's been a big talking point, Borzello. Going into last year, you had players entering the portal throughout the course of and during the NCAA tournament. This was the right move to make, right?
Yeah, coach has been asking this for a couple of years. I mean, this is a perfect example. There was a coach, I'm not going to name him, he was on his way to a Sweet 16 game last year, texted me, said, do you have the number for this kid? And I said, you have a game in 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And he goes, the portal doesn't stop. And,
right.
And now at least, it stops, or at least it doesn't open until after the tournament. So we're not going to have to see guys lose in the Sweet 16 and then go sign 7-8 guys within the next 2 weeks. There's at least a little bit of a breathing period where teams could take stock of their roster.
And maybe college football can take a page out of what the college basketball calendar has done. Not perfect, but certainly improved as well. So that's the college basketball transfer portal. There was also some less satisfying news and certainly a little bit of a dour note that dropped earlier this week. The DOJ released an indictment that covered 17 teams, dozens of games affected by an alleged point-shaving scheme. You have players that were involved in this that played as recently as this week. You also have players that played even into last year that are no longer playing. What was your reaction kind of when this news dropped, Borzello, and what are maybe the fallout reactions that we're going to see?
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me, there was 4 active players on that list. Guys that, like you said, had played Saturday, had played Tuesday. One guy was the Conference USA Player of the Week last week. The big question moving forward for me is whether this is the tip of the iceberg or whether this is sort of they ran out the string and found out what they could. Obviously, it's more concerning for college sports and college basketball if this is the tip of the iceberg. But if it was more of a narrow focus on one sort of gambling syndicate, point-shaving syndicate, and this is the end of the road, I think college sports power brokers will breathe a sigh of relief. But we're not going to know. I mean, I never thought we'd see 20-something college basketball players in an indictment in the middle of the season either.
No, it's a lot, too. And Charlie Baker at the NCAA also released kind of a statement saying, we were aware of many of these names and teams that were associated with this alleged indictment, but also he brought up the questions about, prop bets about players, which, again, the accessibility of the sports betting stuff it just opens doors, and certainly it's a conversation that coaches are going to be having with their players more in depth about what the consequences and the fallouts can be from sports gambling. Time now to check out some magic moments covered by State Farm. Maybe no one in the country needed a win this week more than the Kentucky Wildcats. Baseball pass, Malachi Moreno at the free throw line, bottom. Kentucky steals one on the road at LSU. Borzello, they needed this in the worst way possible. It also looked pretty familiar to Kentucky fans.
Yeah, it looks very similar to a shot that ended a little bit differently for them about 30-something years ago at this point.
Yeah, a little while ago.
They'll take it, though.
They will, and then they were really in danger. I think starting a 1-3 maybe. There's the Leitner shot that we were talking about. Instead, they level the ship at 2-2 in SEC play. But good job by Moreno there, cashing that one in.
Abuka Okori, Stanford freshman guard, 36 points, 9 assists, 60% from the field in a comeback win over Carolina. Stanford, they beat Louisville a couple weeks ago. Now they beat Carolina, playing themselves into tournament contention. Okori, second amongst all freshmen in scoring this year. Crazy. Only behind DeBonsa right now.
It's silly, and we've seen ridiculous stuff from him and the tree. 36 points in 36 minutes there. Ole Miss, not only pulling upsets off on the football field, but also on the basketball court. Here against Georgia, we got overtime. 1 doesn't go, 2 doesn't go. Finally, the putback is there. Third time's the charm for Pat Pinkins. Ole Miss, maybe a little bit of a disappointing start to the year, but good to see them get the win there against a really good Georgia team.
Darren Peterson, came into the season as the projected #1 pick in college in the NBA draft.
Yeah.
And now he looks healthy. He's playing 25, 30 minutes every game, and 26 points, 23 minutes, 13 shots. Just one of the most efficient performances we've seen from anyone all season.
It's been a fascinating follow for Kansas this year and Darren Peterson. It's also been fascinating to watch SMU. Here's Boopy Miller at the buzzer.
Last gasp for the Mustangs. Into Miller, defended by Hammond from half court. Oh, it goes! A taste of madness for Boopy Miller and the Mustangs.
Borzello, he missed the Duke game with the flu, came back and hit the game winner. Miller in the Miller Event Center. Andy Enfield's team making some noise in the ACC this year. Those were your magic moments covered by State Farm. Time now to welcome in our special guest this early morning, Houston Cougars sharpshooter Emanuel Sharp, a senior this year. Emanuel, really appreciate you hopping on Countdown to Game Day with us this morning.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
You've seen it all, man, like whether it be playing in the AAC, the transition to the Big 12, and then dominating once you guys have gotten there. But this is a new year, and obviously the 4th year in the program for you. Talk about this iteration of the Houston Cougars and how you guys have gotten off to such a fast start.
This group's a lot different. We got some more young guys, so it's been a process from the jump. But that's the good thing about this school is the process has been the same pretty much. We integrate the younger guys, get our culture situated, improve our leadership over the summer. I think that was a big point this summer as we were growing is, we got to have voices on the team. That's the good thing about this program is that every year we've had a good leader or good leaders, plural. Last year we had Jawan and LJ. Year before that was Jamal. Year before that it was Marcus Sasser. So, just having, people, especially the seniors, the older guys, being there to talk with the guys and keep guys, uplifted because, the coaching's not easy. So, it's been a process since this summer, but the good thing, I think we're getting better right now and I can feel it.
Talk about a list of players there, Borzello. I mean, LJ, Sasser, that's ridiculous that you just listed off there, Emanuel. But last year, you guys obviously made it to the national title game, and you mentioned off-season voices stepping up. What other lessons did you guys take away from reaching the national title last year, going into this year? Because I know obviously the goal is to win it all.
I would say the main thing I learned just going through that deep tournament run was, how hard it is to win just a single game. People talk about, getting to the Final Four, getting to the Sweet 16, but with us, it's really about focusing on one game at a time because it's really it's really hard to win a single basketball game. I think that's underrated. But you gotta get up for every game. Every game, especially in the Big 12. Every game is a game that you can get got. Like I know you see a bunch of upsets. Every day you have to bring in the right energy and the right attitude because every team can beat you. And in the tournament, getting up for every game is important. We had a tough run. We played Gonzaga, Purdue, Tennessee. We could have lost every single one of those games, but we had the guys on the team to come every day to practice with the right attitude and the ability to get up.
Now, Emanuel, you talked before about how this year's team is younger, and Coach Sampson has said that starting 2 freshmen, and he's talked about the difficulties of it. What is the difference for you in playing with 2 guys who had never played college basketball before?
I mean, that's it right there. There's not a lot of college experience, so how they react to certain situations or how they come to practice. It's all tied into their experience, and at the end, no matter how good they are, Kingston, Chris, and Zay are some of the best players I played with. But at the end of the day, they're still freshmen, so they're going to need some guidance at the end of the day. So they just need somebody in their ear to talk to them, other than Sam, to talk to them, let them know what's expected of them, and to keep them, on a straight line throughout the season, because there's a lot of bumps and bruises throughout the season, mentally, physically. Some people get up and down. So, the other players on the team got to be there for them to help them.
Now, Coach Sampson, you've been with him since 2022 at this point. Obviously, one of the best coaches in the country. What makes him so special? And then, obviously, he's very intense on the floor. You have any funny stories about him? Anything that shows his personality a little bit?
I'm trying to think of one that I can share on here. It's not. I don't think it's a specific story, first I say what makes him such a great coach is his ability to get players to reach a type of potential or get something out of them that they could never get, out of themselves. I feel like he brings greatness out of every player that he's coached. I mean, he's done that with me for sure. But he's got that ability. He coaches hard, but it's with love. And so, the longer you play for him, you realize that you gotta, ignore maybe some of the yelling and the cussing, and because there's always a deeper message under it, and that's what he's doing it for. You got to be able to decipher some of his coaching, and find what he's really trying to tell you. Because at the end of the day, he wants to win, just as every other player on the court does. So, and you got to match his intensity. But I'd probably say, it happened, a couple weeks ago. I made a bonehead play. He's screaming at me, calling me all kind of names. And then as soon as he gets done, he's like, all right, make sure you guard the best player. Like, he's right back to business. Right back to business after he gets done yelling. It just shows that he's really just in the moment. He's really, he's intense, and he's up for the moment. So, he might just say things in the heat of the moment, but, he's right after he gets done, he's right there telling me my matchup and what we got to do on offense and defense.
So you guys got the rare Sunday game in the middle of the season tomorrow. So no game today. What does the day look like today? Will you consume any of the other basketball games that are going on the slate today?
No, I mean, not really. Maybe later, at the house, I might, check the scores or turn on a couple games. But, we're really focused on Arizona State, and that's really what it's been the past couple of days. Real focused. We take the scouts real serious. So, just watching as much film and as getting locked into the scout report as much as possible.
Last but certainly not least, obviously, we know your history growing up with parents who played at the professional level. Obviously, going and experiencing that, I'm sure you learned a lot from them. But who were some other players maybe that you took pieces and parts from their game to emulate as you got older and matriculated through the game?
I would say growing up, I didn't really take from other players as much, but, because I had, great parents, they were really involved in my basketball career, just giving me pointers. But, I don't think I started pulling from other players until I got to Houston. And I had leaders, like I said, all those names I've listed earlier, I pulled something from, each one of their games. That doesn't have to be, offensively, but, I looked at Jamal for his defense. I had him as a role model because he was, defensive player of the year. He's probably the best defender in the country. So, taking pointers from him, with my shooting ability, I got to play with Marcus Sasser and LJ Cryer. Those are two of the best shooters that you will ever, find. So, like I said, each year is just pulling bits and pieces from, the guys that I have in front of me.
Make sure you tune in again, ESPN, 6:30 Eastern time tomorrow, Sunday. Houston and Emanuel going to be taking on Arizona State at the Fertitta Center. E, really appreciate you hopping on again. Best of luck the rest of the season. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Well, top storylines in 2016. We're all dialed into the social media trends. Borzello's fired up about this. Yeah, Chris Jenkins, Nova, national title game winner. Ryan Arcidiacono, I think, was the MVP of that Final Four. Buddy Hield, National Player of the Year there. What do you remember about the year in college basketball 10 years ago?
Ben Simmons. He was an incredible player. I mean, we're talking about it at the freshman all show. He was as good as they were 10 years ago.
Right.
I don't love to look back at 2016, given that it reminds me of how old I am now. But the college basketball season was incredible. Obviously, that shot, Bo Ryan stepped down.
Sure. Yeah.
One of the legendary coaches, and it was the first. It was kind of the beginning of that Villanova run. 2 titles in 3 years,
right.
and kind of emerged as sort of a blue blood in the 2010s.
Yeah, and that was a really good North Carolina team, too. You see all of their players there, but Chris Jenkins at the buzzer, I think it was a 3-point win, 77.
The iconic Jay Wright boom.
Oh, yeah, boom. Yeah, that was good, man. 2016 was a good year. But we are going to hop on this social media trend, and we brought up some pictures from both Jeff and I's lives back in 2016. We were in a little bit of different places, I think. But we both made our ESPN debuts in 2016, right?
Yes, I think I was 18 months or so into my ESPN career.
Yeah, Kenny Chesney there, and my old man there in the middle there. Getting to meet Kenny Chesney in 2016, that was pretty cool. The previous picture, Scott Boras made a trip out to Pepperdine where I was a student and calling baseball games, so that was pretty cool in 2016.
Me and Taco Fall.
Whoa!
Yep, about 2 feet taller than me.
That's it?
Hey. I'm not that short.
Well, I mean, I'm just...
Not that short. Yep.
What was that experience like?
It was fun. There was my legendary Halloween costume, Forrest Gump.
Run, Jeff, run.
There you go.
Yeah.
Some personal... I mean, I got engaged that year, bought a house that year.
That's a big year for you.
It was a huge year for me. Yeah. Now, you're younger than me, so I think your 2016 was maybe a little bit more fun.
There's the
engagement. I guess I would say.
Yeah.
There you go, my dog hanging on me. Yep.
It was a little different in college in 2016. But, man, we were all looking to, what's next? We're looking to when we can start our career and stuff. But, man, 2016 was a good year. The thing with 2016 was, all as great as the college basketball was that year, you could make an argument that this year may be even more compelling. When you look at the slate that we have today, heading into the month of January, we knew a couple of things. We knew Michigan was a great team. We knew Arizona was great, but there were also some question marks in there. Kentucky was one of the disappointing teams that spent so much money on their roster. They're going to Tennessee today. Tennessee is 6.5-point favorite in this one. Vanderbilt and Mark Byington, who we've already talked about, has been a really good surprise. North Carolina on the road at Cal. They're looking to rebound after that loss to Stanford. And then when you look at the bottom half of the slate later on tonight, top 15 matchup in Lubbock, Texas. A.J. DeBonsa, Christian Anderson, J.T. Toppin. That's going to be a really good one.
I mean, the stars are going to be out in that one.
Yeah.
To me, the fascinating storyline going into today is what happens in the SEC.
Sure.
Kentucky they seem to hit rock bottom about a week ago. Jaden Quaintance was sitting out. They're now 2-0 without him.
Yeah.
Blew out Mississippi State. Obviously, the buzzer beater.
Right.
Beat LSU the other day. They're still playing in a little bit of desperation mode. And so I think, can they go on the road and at least keep it close with Tennessee, maybe sneak out a win? And then that Florida-Vanderbilt game.
Sure.
Vanderbilt, we've talked about them, one of the storylines of the season. Florida, to me, looks like the best team in the SEC. And they seem to be coming back around. Their guards seem to be figuring it out a little bit. Obviously, we've seen them plenty of that front court. We've seen win plenty of games over the last couple of years. So to me, the SEC is still maybe the most intriguing storyline of the day.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into some of these storylines here. Reminder, you're watching Countdown to Game Day covered by State Farm. Hit the buzzer. There we go. And it is time to start. We'll start right there in that Kentucky and Tennessee game. They're going to Knoxville. Kentucky, $20+ million on the roster. The first half of that LSU game, Mark Pope was getting fired.
Yeah,
I mean, he was getting the heat on the social media. So how do they keep it rolling in Knoxville against, again, a Tennessee team that is also disappointed to a certain extent this year?
Well, if Malachi Marino can make more shots like that,
helps.
That'll help.
Yeah.
But it's their guard play. I mean, Otega Owe, Denzel Aberdeen, they were tremendous in the second half against LSU. They're going to need to step up again. Obviously, there's no Jaden Quaintance again. Jalen Lowe is out for the season. So they're going to need those guys that played really well late against LSU to play well again. Now, Tennessee, Nate Ament, he's been a little bit more assertive lately. He was a top 5 recruit coming into school. He's probably still going to be a top 10 NBA draft pick. He needs to start asserting himself, continuing to assert himself on the offensive end.
So it is 6.5 point favorites for the Vols at home. Do you think Kentucky keeps it close, or do you think Tennessee maybe covers that spread there?
I think they'll keep it close.
I'm with you.
I think that's going to be a game. I think Kentucky, they might have figured something out since these injuries, since Quaintance went down, since Lowe went down. I think their guards are going to play better, and I just think they have the offense, they have the scoring to get points against Tennessee. And I just don't know if Jacoby Gillespie, Nate Ament, who's going to step up for Tennessee outside of those two guys.
Rick Barnes trying to find some offense. The defense has also been suspect at times. We got the feeling after you beat Kentucky tomorrow. Look, it'll be interesting because, Kentucky has had the upper hand. That game noon Eastern time on ESPN as of late. Tennessee, third in the SEC, 41 points in the paint this year. We'll go out to Palo Alto. Both Duke and North Carolina taking that West Coast swing. We've already seen Duke struggle out there. Now they, so Duke traveling west. So they're taking on Stanford. Interesting matchup to see what North Carolina struggling against Stanford. What do you think Duke does now against Stanford in Emeka Buga?
Yeah, Stanford's already beat Louisville and North Carolina out there. And Duke, for about a half against Cal the other day, they had their moments of struggle as well. If they get down to Stanford to me is better than Cal, and a win like this could go a long way toward getting them in that NCAA tournament picture. But the way Cam Boozer's been playing, Isaiah Evans has been incredible for Duke lately. Duke has really needed that second option to give some sort of balance to on the perimeter for Boozer on the inside. Evans has been that guy. He's averaging 22 points and shooting 40% from 3 in his last 4 games. If he could continue to do that, I think Duke has enough on both sides of the ball to beat Stanford.
What were your expectations for Duke coming into this year? Because I think that maybe plays into what we think about this current team. Obviously, a Cooper Flagg is gone, right? You're missing so many players from that team last year. So what were your expectations for Duke coming in, and how have they maybe met them or underperformed to you?
Yeah, with so many coaches trying to go older, Shire's really leaned into, I'm going to keep going with freshmen. I'm going to get the most talented roster we can that also can play well together,
right,
and we're going to figure it out. And this freshman class that he brought in was maybe not as good overall, top to bottom, as last year's was. And I think that's kind of been, they have one loss. It's not like they have a ton of issues, and that was a 1-point loss on a neutral floor to Texas Tech. But they've been needing that Conca nipple or that second option to step up, and it's not a freshman this year. It's going to be Isaiah Evans.
Right.
The rest of the freshmen have been up and down. Dame Sarr, Caden Boozer, Nick Kamenia. When those guys kind of hit their stride, I still don't think we've seen the best from Duke. I don't think John Shire knows his best lineup yet. And so I think they still have some things to figure out, which is probably a good sign for Duke, that they're not playing their best basketball and they're still 15-1, 16-1 in late January.
And the slow starts, too, a little bit concerning, right? I mean, the opener against Georgia Tech trailed the half. Louisville, I think they trailed the half, won that one comfortably. So we'll see if they can get the faster starts going. They started slow against SMU. One team is not going to let them come back at some point. Another massive matchup in the SEC here in Tennessee, but this time it's over in Nashville. Defending national champions Florida Gators taking on Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's been one of the surprises of the season so far. So too has Florida, but maybe not for the same reasons that Mark Byington's team has been. So for Vandy, after losing the first game on the road at Texas, which has a ton of size, we're going to see a lot of size against this Florida front court. How do you see this matchup?
Yeah, it's going to be a matchup between essentially can Vanderbilt's guards outplay Florida's guards more than Florida's bigs can outplay Vanderbilt's bigs. And like I said, I think Florida, Boogie Flan in particular, has been playing a lot better lately. He got a haircut.
That helps.
And it has turned around his season. It's meant to turn around Florida's season. And like I said, I still think Florida is probably the best team in the SEC. And a win today on the road against the favorite in the SEC, on paper at least, it would go a long way. And so to me, I give Florida the edge. And Thomas Houck, as we'll talk about in a moment, he's playing at an All-American level. And I just don't think Vanderbilt has anyone that can match up with him.
Doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he does for this team. But yeah, the backcourt was, again, questionable with Xavier Lee, as you mentioned, coming in this year. How were they going to replace those big three from the national title run? Wow, this is going to be too long to read. Sorry, Zach. I'm not going to be able to read this whole thing, but we can get the gist of it. A full analysis from Valve on this big game Houck and how he's played throughout the course of the season. Vandy and Mark Byington looking to improve on what has been an amazing start, best start in program history there in Nashville. Let's finish up with the 8 p.m. game out in Lubbock, Texas. Two incredible stars going head-to-head. JT Toppin, Christian Anderson has been great, maybe one of the best duos in the country this year. And then, of course, the big three, but really headlined by AJ DeBonsa and BYU. Thoughts on this matchup here in Lubbock tonight?
At BYU, they only have one loss. It was to UConn in a game that they came all the way back and almost beat UConn in Boston.
Did. Yeah.
We haven't seen BYU really tested against an elite competition or in a really tough road environment. This is going to be both of those. This is to me, this is a real test for DeBonsa, for Rob Wright, for Richie Saunders and BYU. You know, that Rob Wright, Christian Anderson matchup at the point guard spot is going to be incredibly intriguing.
Right.
Does BYU have the depth? I mean, they've had a ton of injuries. Do they have the depth to keep up with JT Toppin down low? To me, I just give the edge to AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders. BYU's shown time and time again, no matter what the deficit is in the second half, when they need baskets, they have three guys that can get baskets better than pretty much any trio in the country. And I think that in a close game like this, I think that's going to have the edge.
When that place is rocking down there in Lubbock, Texas, it is one of the hardest places to go and play in. So we will see how that one plays out tonight. So many good games here. Again, we are just about like 8+ weeks away from Selection Sunday. It's hard to believe that we're already reaching the midway point of the college basketball season. But we will have a ton more coverage for you every single Saturday morning. You can tune in to Countdown to Game Day right before College Game Day gets started. Jeff Borzello will be here. We will also have Myron Metcalf joining in studio. Joe Lenardi is going to start getting his camper out here in Bristol, Connecticut, and he'll be
in the bunker.
He'll be holed out in the bunker for the rest of the foreseeable future. But that is going to do it for us here on this Saturday. For our entire crew, Jeff Borzello, I am Sam Ravech saying so long. Thank you so much for watching Countdown to Game Day, covered by State Farm. Enjoy the slate, everybody.